A gente vai receber agora um dos maiores especialistas em economia informal nos Estados Unidos. Ele que foi o primeiro economista a alertar sobre a bolha imobiliária que viria a explodir, falou isso em 2004, PhD em Economia pela Universidade de Auburn, editor da seção de críticas literárias do Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics, autor do livro The Economics of Prohibition, ele que também é especialista em economia da Guerra Civil Americana, bolhas e finanças públicas. Por favor, aplaudam. Mark Thornton.
I want to thank you all for the opportunity to participate in this very important event and to discuss Austrian business cycle theory with you. The first Austrian Economics Conference in Brazil is a pivotal event in intellectual history. The last 2 or 3 years, Austrian economics has grown tremendously as a movement, as an intellectual movement, and it's been great to be part of all that. And then when the Hayek versus Keynes rap video came out, I've just been giddy about Austrian economics ever. Giddy? And then when I walked into the room this morning at 9:30, I could feel goosebumps in my body. If Austrian economics can come to dominate the economic debate in Brazil, then I have no doubt that it will come to dominate public policy and be a very important influence in world economic affairs. Therefore, it is a tremendous honor to speak to you here today. And also, I've wanted to visit Brazil for many, many years. More than a decade ago, I met a Brazilian man named Ronald, who was from São Paulo. Ronald did not know a word of English, and I did not know a word of Brazilian Portuguese. However, we were somehow able to communicate, and we had a conversation that lasted more than 3 hours. And during that conversation, I was taught everything I ever needed to know about cachaça. Cachaça? I'm still working on the pronunciation. My purpose today is to describe, distinguish, and demonstrate the superiority of the Austrian school's theory of the business cycle. This is called the Austrian business cycle theory, or most simply, the ABC theory. As you will see, there are important methodological and theoretical differences between Austrian theory and mainstream theories, and that these differences are critical. The distinctive differences are not only important for understanding events as they unfold, but they also direct us in the right path of policy reform. The ABC theory is the only true economic theory of the business cycle. It applies economic theory and analysis to the phenomenon we know as the business cycle. And of course, business cycles are simply the periodic increase and decreases in economic activity. Here, a boom is followed by a bust. For decades, mainstream economists have tried to water down this bust phase of the cycle, changing terms like depression and panic into less painful sounding terminology like recession, downturn, slowdown, or even soft landing. The current crisis has mainstream economists in the United States frantically searching for labels to deny reality, but I think the truth is clear to all. Now, what is the cause of this phenomenon we call the business cycle? Karl Marx concluded that business cycles were simply part of the nature of capitalism, and that capitalism was inherently unstable. Now, as bad as his theory is, it turns out to be better, at least in some respect, than those of the mainstream economists. For example, the Keynesians believe that the business cycle is the result of changes in social psychology. Here, the boom is the result of entrepreneurs making investments that are profitable. Then they become comfortable and make more investments that are also profitable. They remain confident and make still more investments. New investors enter the market, and all this investment feeds on itself, creating boom conditions, and boom conditions then encourage lavish spending in the economy. Then, for whatever reason, and you'll actually hear Keynesians say that, for whatever reason, some bad news or some bad data emerges that makes or begins to make investors question the future, to rethink their plans, to become more cautious, to cut back, to retrench. These bad feelings then spread to other investors. Caution and pessimism spread throughout markets. Investments lose their profitability or suffer losses or even become bankrupt. People become depressed, and the economy enters a depression. That's the Keynesian story. Notice that there is no cause for the cycle other than psychology. It's merely changes in psychology that force changes in economic conditions. Markets do not stabilize. Markets only help push the economy further into disequilibrium. And worst of all, the Keynesians blame you for the whole mess. It's your fault. That's pretty key to the Keynesian story. Many non-Keynesian mainstream economists give a similar structure to their business cycle theories, but simply give a different cause. Painting with a broad brush, you can take everybody from Schumpeter to the modern stochastic general equilibrium theorists. They hold that the economy is only potentially stable, but it's actually unstable due to the forces of reality. In other words, the economy would be stable in theory if it were not for such things as technology shocks, or supply shocks, or creative destruction. These are just simply given and are not explained themselves. For example, what causes a technology shock to happen in the first place? And why can't markets make the adjustment even over a period of years? It is precisely these shocks that need to be explained by economic theory. Now, Austrian economists view the business cycle in terms of price theory and time preference. Austrians do not assume the existence of a perfect invisible hand. In fact, the ABC theory must be able to explain precisely why there is this clustering of entrepreneurial errors over the business cycle. For example, there could be something wrong in the institutional settings of the market economy that produces this clustering of male investments. In fact, our investigation can be easily extended because business cycles, after all, are a macroeconomic phenomenon that impacts the entire economy. The two best candidates for the cause of the business cycle, of course, are the interest rate and money. Both of these two things are pervasive throughout the economy. The interest rate in particular is important because of its role in bringing about savings and investment into harmony. If we are trying to determine the cause of this clustering of bad investments, then the interest rate is pivotal to our investigation. In the unhampered market economy, interest is determined by time preference. Some people have an urgent need to consume now, while others have a less urgent need to consume now and can be enticed to save. Interest, it is interest that brings about a harmonious resolution to the value we place on consumption now versus the value of consumption in the future, as well as the value that we place on the inputs of production. Lower time preferences in society mean a lower value to consumption, and hence more resources are made available to expand the process of production. And so lower time preferences essentially can lead to economic growth. This means that entrepreneurs can undertake more complex production processes that were previously unattainable. For example, dairy farmers can milk their cattle and move the milk directly to their consumers. However, if these same entrepreneurs had enough resources, they could build processing centers, warehouses, and distribution networks that could deliver greater amounts of milk at a lower cost by exploiting economies of scale. Here we have taken a direct process of the dairy farmer going directly to their customer with a new process or a new technology in the broadest sense that is more roundabout, taking the milk to the processing centers and the warehouses and so forth. So it's more roundabout and it's more efficient. Now, the most obvious manifestation of interest in the economy is the interest rate. Every loan has an interest rate associated with it. And this accounts for the size and the risk of the loan, as well as transactions costs. But there is always an underlying interest in all loans. And that interest is the result of time preference. And it is obvious to just about everybody that central banks have the power to manipulate short-term interest rates through their open market operations with banks. It is also clear that they can influence long-term interest rates as well. And furthermore, they can impact the assessment of risk if they have set the precedent of bailing out investors and banks in the past. Now, to the extent that the central bank is active at all in this manner, it must create a distortion in the interest rate in the sense of distorting the market rate that we pay away from that which otherwise would have existed. However, if the central bank lowers the interest rate from that which it otherwise would have been, it sends entrepreneurs a false signal that more resources are now available for their production processes. Meanwhile, that signal also leads consumers to save less and consume more. The combination of increased investment and increased consumption is the boom itself. The fact that promising new technologies are coming into place seem to help justify the fact that this time things are different. Therefore, in Austrian analysis, we do not naively assume the invisible hand or a perfect invisible hand, nor have we discarded the invisible hand. The ABC theory is the result of investigating the invisible hand and diagnosing the problem using what is commonly referred to as microeconomic theory. In this manner, the ABC theory of the business cycle is both realistic and based on economic theory. Now, unlike mainstream economists, Austrian economists view the boom phase of the cycle as the problem, and we view the bust phase of the cycle as the solution. It is during the boom phase of the cycle that all the male investment projects are put into place. These are investments in real estate, construction, and technology and equipment that fundamentally alter the structure of production, just as in the example of the dairy industry.